Good evening, all, and welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight, we journey into the frozen heart and forgotten corners of Pennsylvania, through isolated small towns, endless wilderness, and places where help does not reach, to uncover 7 of the most disturbing, real, and terrifying horror stories ever recorded. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Dark Fears for daily true horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now, let us step into the shadows of Pennsylvania, where civilization ends. My name is Ethan Miller, and this happened when I was 27, living in a fading coal town in northeastern Pennsylvania called Ashbrook. I moved there after my father died, hoping cheap rent and quiet nights would help me reset my life. Ashbrook was the kind of place people forgot. Boarded storefronts, collapsing porches, and mine roads that cut through the forest like scars that never healed. Locals warned me about walking at night, especially near the old mining routes. They said sound traveled wrong there, like the woods swallowed it. I laughed it off. I worked late shifts at a gas station, and the walk home saved me money. The first night I noticed him, it was foggy and cold. I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate, matching mine exactly. When I stopped, they stopped. When I turned around, no one was there. Just the empty mine road stretching behind me, and the unsettling feeling that something had been walking with me, not toward me. That was the night I realized Ashbrook wasn't empty. It was waiting. The next few nights, I convinced myself it was paranoia. Grief does strange things to your mind, especially when you're alone in a place that feels half dead. But the footsteps kept returning, always on the mined road, always after midnight, always behind me. Never rushing, never falling back. Just close enough that I could feel company without seeing it. One night, I forced myself to keep walking no matter what. My heart was hammering, my hands shaking inside my jacket pockets. I counted my steps in my head, trying to drown out the sound behind me. 43, 44, 45. The footsteps stayed perfectly in sync. Then I noticed something worse. My breath was fogging in front of my face, but behind me, in the beam of my flashlight, I saw another cloud of breath, rising low to the ground, heavier than mine. Too slow, too deep. I stopped again. The second breath stopped too. I whispered, "Hello?" The word felt wrong the moment it left my mouth, like I had just acknowledged something that had been waiting for permission. The footsteps didn't follow me the next night. That almost felt worse. The mine road was silent, too silent, like the woods were holding their breath. I kept glancing over my shoulder, my flashlight shaking as it swept across trees and rusted warning signs left over from when the mines were still active. Nothing moved, nothing followed. When I reached my trailer, I noticed muddy footprints leading up to my steps. They were long and narrow, pressed deep into the dirt, as if whoever made them was far heavier than they should have been. They stopped right at my door. There were no prints leaving. I didn't sleep that night. Around 3 a.m., I heard something outside. Slow steps circling the trailer, wood creaking softly under weight. A low sound followed, not quite a breath, not quite a growl. It felt patient, curious. I sat frozen on my bed, phone in hand, afraid that if I moved, it would know exactly where I was. That was when I realized the footsteps didn't want to follow me anymore. It wanted me to come back outside. The next day, I asked around at the gas station. Old men who barely spoke suddenly went quiet when I mentioned the mine roads. One of them, a retired miner named Caleb, finally pulled me aside. His hands shook as he lit a cigarette. He told me the mines were never fully sealed. Collapses happened, men were lost, Some were never recovered. He said people used to hear footsteps underground long after shifts ended, boots dragging, breath echoing through tunnels where no one should be alive. They don't like being forgotten, Caleb said, and they don't like being alone. That night, I tried a different route home. Halfway through, I heard it again. Not behind me this time, but beside me, matching my pace through the trees. I turned my flashlight toward the sound. For a split second, I saw a shape moving between trunks. Too tall, shoulders hunched, legs bending the wrong way. Its face stayed hidden, but I felt its attention lock onto me. Then the footsteps changed direction. They were heading toward the mine entrance ahead of me. I should have turned back. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, to get as far away from the mine entrance as possible. But something heavier than fear pulled at me. Curiosity mixed with a strange sense that I was being invited. The footsteps slowed, then stopped completely, as if waiting to see whether I would follow. The mine entrance sat open like a black wound in the hillside, surrounded by rusted fencing bent outward, not inward. Cold air poured from it, carrying the smell of damp earth and rot. I stood at the edge, shining my flashlight inside. The beam barely reached 10 feet before the darkness swallowed it. Then I heard it, breathing, deep, uneven, and wrong. Not echoing like a normal sound should, but thick, as if the air itself resisted it. I whispered that I was sorry, though I didn't know why. The breathing paused. A shape shifted just beyond the light, and something scraped against stone from inside the mine, slow and deliberate, as if it were standing up. I ran. Branches tore at my jacket as I bolted down the road, my lungs burning, my boots slipping on gravel. Behind me, the footsteps returned. But they weren't matching mine anymore. They were faster, heavier. Each step sounded like it was crushing the ground beneath it. I didn't look back until I reached the edge of town. When I finally did, the road was empty. No footsteps, no breathing. Just the distant outline of the mine road disappearing into the trees. That night, I dreamed I was underground, crawling through narrow tunnels while something followed just close enough that I could feel its breath on my neck. I woke up screaming. The next morning, my boots were gone. In their place, sitting neatly by the door, were mine boots. Old, cracked leather, caked in dried mud that smelled like the earth near the mine. Inside each boot, pressed deep into the sole, were footprints that didn't match my feet. They were far too long. I tried leaving Ashbrook after that, but every road out of town seemed wrong. Signs I remembered were gone, streets twisted in ways they shouldn't. And at night, the footsteps returned, not behind me, but around me, circling, waiting. I could hear them pacing the edges of the trailer, the crunch of gravel, the drag of boots that didn't belong to any human I knew. I spoke to Caleb again, begging for answers. He only shook his head. Once it chooses you, Ethan, you don't leave. He gave me a small, worn piece of chalk and whispered, "Mark your doors, windows, any opening. It respects boundaries. Sometimes." That night, I did as he said. Chalk lines around doors, windows, even the floorboards. When the footsteps came, they stopped at the edges of the chalk. I could see the shadow lingering just beyond the faint white lines, shifting, crouching, studying me. It stayed until dawn, then vanished, like it never existed. I realized something terrifying. It wasn't hunting me. It was studying me, learning me, waiting. Weeks passed. I tried pretending nothing happened. I left lights on, never walked the mine road alone. But each night, I felt the weight of eyes on me, a heavy, silent presence that tested the chalk lines, circling the trailer in a rhythm I could never predict. One night, I was careless. I stepped over the chalk line at the back door while fetching water. The footsteps changed immediately. Fast, deliberate, crushing gravel. A low, guttural sound resonated from the woods. I didn't wait. I ran into the trailer and slammed the door, heart hammering, sweat soaking my shirt. When I dared to peek out, the shape stood just beyond the chalk, taller than ever, its face still hidden in shadow. Then it did something I wasn't prepared for. It raised a hand, slow, deliberate, as if pointing at me, accusing, commanding. I knew then it wasn't just in the mine. It was in Ashbrook. It was in my life, and it would never leave. I decided I had no choice but to confront it. I couldn't keep living in fear, chained to chalk lines and shadows. One foggy night, I grabbed a flashlight and a crowbar, and I stepped onto the mine road. The footsteps started almost immediately. Slower at first, then faster, circling around me like a predator testing its prey. The fog thickened, wrapping around me like hands I couldn't see. Then, in the glow of my flashlight, I saw it. Tall, hunched, legs bending wrong, head tilted unnaturally. Its face remained hidden, but I could feel its eyes boring into me, learning, memorizing. I swung the crowbar instinctively. It didn't flinch. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then it stepped back into the fog and vanished. I realized something terrifying. It had given me permission to live. For now. But the sense of being watched never left. Even in town, I could feel it, always just beyond my vision, waiting for the moment I slipped. I moved out of Ashbrook soon after, leaving everything behind. I thought leaving would be enough to escape it. But I learned quickly that the mine roads weren't just part of a place. They were part of a presence that followed. Months later, I received a package at my new address. Inside was a small vial of earth, caked with dark mud. Alongside it was a note, scratched in jagged letters. You walked, you saw, we remember. That night, I heard it again. The slow, deliberate footsteps circling my apartment outside my door. My walls rattled, my floor creaked. The shadows shifted, just beyond the edge of vision. I realized the truth. Some things aren't bound by location. Some things follow. Some things wait. And some things never forgive curiosity. I don't walk at night anymore. I don't answer the knocks. And I pray that one day it will forget me. But I know it won't. My name is Hannah Rivers, and this happened when I was 19, visiting my grandmother's old farmhouse near Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The house had been in her family for generations, sitting at the edge of endless woods that seemed to stretch on forever. Locals told stories about the forest, strange noises, missing hikers, and the whispering voices that haunted the trees. But I didn't believe them. I thought they were just old superstitions, stories to scare children. One evening, after helping my grandmother with chores, I wandered toward the woods to pick wild herbs for dinner. The sun was dipping low, painting the forest in fiery orange. But as I stepped under the canopy, the air grew cold. The birds were silent. The usual rustle of animals vanished. Then I heard it, a whisper. Faint at first, almost like the wind brushing against leaves, but unmistakably human. My name. Hannah, it hissed. I froze. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. The voice came again, closer this time, threading through the trees. I stepped back, gripping the basket of herbs, and the whispering stopped. Silence. But then, laughter, low, breathy, and wrong, echoed through the forest. It wasn't a laugh I recognized. It didn't belong to any human. The sounds seemed to wrap around me, coming from all directions at once. Panicked, I tried to retrace my steps, but the forest had changed. Trails I remembered vanished. The trees seemed closer, the shadows deeper. Every step I took, I could hear the whispers again. Faint at first, then rising in a chorus. Hannah. Hannah. It was coming from inside the trees, around the trunks, from above, below, everywhere. Then I saw movement. Shadows flitting between the trees, humanoid, but stretched thin, like elongated silhouettes. I could never see faces, only forms, crouching, watching. My basket fell, spilling herbs onto the forest floor. I ran blindly, branches tearing at my clothes, fear gnawing at my chest, and still, the voices followed me, mocking every step. I finally stumbled into a small clearing, gasping for air, my hands scraped and bleeding from branches. The whispers faded, replaced by a deep, unsettling silence that pressed against my ears. I thought I had escaped, thought the woods had let me go. But then I saw it, a faint glow between the trees, not like sunlight, but like something alive, pulsing with a pale green light. Curiosity warred with terror. I inched closer. The glow revealed shapes, thin and twisted, standing motionless among the trees. They didn't move, but I felt their gaze pierce me. And then I heard the whispers again, more urgent, almost pleading. Hannah, come closer, join us. I turned to run, but the glow shifted, blocking my path. The shapes seemed to move without sound, sliding between the trees, keeping pace with me. I realized then that the forest wasn't just haunted. It was alive, aware, and hungry for someone who had dared to enter without permission. I ran blindly through the woods, branches slapping my face, roots tripping me. But the glow followed, flickering between trees like eyes watching me. Every time I paused, the whispers returned, louder, more insistent. Hannah, don't fight. I found a small stream and stumbled into it, hoping the water would confuse whatever was tracking me. The glowing figures hovered just beyond the bank, staring, silent but commanding. Then I heard the laughter again, low, hollow, echoing off the trees like it came from everywhere and nowhere. My legs burned, my lungs screamed, but I had no choice but to push forward. That's when I noticed something impossible. The forest seemed endless, yet I could see the farmhouse lights faintly through the trees. Yet the closer I ran, the further the light seemed. The path twisted and folded, as if the forest itself was reshaping to trap me, forcing me deeper into its heart. I realized with a chill, this wasn't just a forest. It was a prison, and I was its newest inmate. I collapsed against a tree, trying to catch my breath, listening as the whispers grew louder, overlapping into a chorus of voices that seemed to come from every direction at once. They weren't just saying my name anymore. They were repeating things I had never spoken aloud, secrets I had never shared, memories no one else could know. My skin crawled, my mind reeling. I glanced through the trees and saw movement. Thousands of tiny, flickering shadows. More than I could count, all moving in unison, weaving through the branches, circling me. The glow from before pulsed, lighting up the forest like a living heart. And I realized the whispers were guiding them, controlling them. Desperation overtook fear. I ran blindly again, crashing into the undergrowth. Branches tore at my clothes and hair, but I didn't care. Every step felt like I was running on borrowed time, and the voices were right behind me now. Breathing, whispering, laughing. I stumbled into a hollowed grove and froze. The whispers stopped suddenly, replaced by a suffocating silence that pressed against my chest. The glow had disappeared, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, I dared to hope I had escaped. Then the ground beneath me shifted slightly, and I realized I was standing on uneven soil, like the forest had moved to trap me. The whispers returned, but closer, sharper, urgent. I could feel the shapes circling me, pressing against the tree trunks, leaning out from shadows, watching every movement. I screamed and ran again, but now my legs felt heavy, like I was wading through mud that wasn't there. The farmhouse lights flickered in the distance, tantalizingly close, yet impossibly far. Every path I took led me deeper into the trees, deeper into the whispers, deeper into the forest's hunger. I knew then, with a sickening certainty, that the forest didn't just want to scare me, it wanted something far worse. Panic clawed at me, but I forced myself to slow down, thinking maybe the forest was testing me, trying to break me. The whispers had grown almost intelligent. They no longer repeated words, but questions, suggestions, taunts. Why do you run? Stay with us. Stay forever. I stumbled across a fallen tree and saw something that made my blood run cold. Deep impressions in the soil, human-sized footprints, but elongated, distorted, and moving in circles, as if pacing around me. Every step I took, the forest echoed it, reshaping itself to mimic my movements. The shadows between trees seemed to lean forward, craning long limbs, almost smiling. I realized the horrifying truth. The forest wasn't just alive. It was learning me, adapting to me, mirroring me, and hunting me by understanding my fear. Every choice I made only tightened its control. The farmhouse was still ahead, but every branch, every tree now felt like a living barrier, a wall between me and safety, forcing me deeper into the dark heart of the woods. I could see the farmhouse again, dim lights flickering through the dense canopy. Relief surged, but it was short-lived. As I approached, the whispers intensified, overlapping into a deafening roar, echoing my own footsteps back at me. Every time I moved faster, the shadows mirrored me, keeping pace effortlessly. Suddenly, I saw them, dozens of forms crouched just beyond the tree line, their glowing eyes fixed on me. They didn't run or attack. They just watched, waiting. My legs felt like stone. My chest burned. But I forced myself forward. The whispers sharpened into a single voice, louder than the rest. Come, or never leave. The shadows shifted, forming a solid wall that blocked the path to the farmhouse. I felt their presence pressing in, a weight on my shoulders, and I realized I had only two choices: submit or be consumed entirely. Terror gripped me. The forest had me cornered, and for the first time, I understood the full scope of its hunger. I knew I had to act fast. Standing frozen in the forest, I remembered something my grandmother had told me as a child. Never acknowledge the voices in the woods. Keep your mind to yourself, or they take more than your body. With shaking hands, I closed my eyes and forced myself to breathe deeply, focusing only on the farmhouse lights. I ignored the whispers, the taunts, the calls of my name. Slowly, I stepped forward. The shadows stiffened, swaying like trees in a storm, but they didn't advance. The whispers grew frantic, overlapping in desperation, but I forced my pace. My legs burned, my heart pounded. Yet the closer I moved, the clearer the farmhouse became. Finally, I reached the edge of the clearing. The shadows recoiled at the boundary of the open ground. The whispers didn't follow. They hovered at the edge, like predators unable to cross into light. I dared to exhale. For the first time, I felt I might have survived. I made it to the farmhouse porch, collapsing in tears and mud, my hands clutching the railing, The whispers were gone, but the memory of their voices lingered in my mind like a sickness. My grandmother came out, worry etched across her face, and I could barely speak, only pointing toward the forest. When we went to the edge the next morning, the forest looked normal. There were no footprints, no signs of the figures, nothing to suggest what I had seen. But deep in the soil, faint impressions of elongated humanoid shapes remained, distorted footprints that seemed to pulse faintly in the morning light. I never returned to the woods alone again. I learned that some places aren't haunted in the way you expect. They are alive, aware, and patient. And some things, whispers, shadows, horrors, wait quietly until curiosity drives someone back into their grasp. I still hear the whispers sometimes, in dreams, calling me back. And I know one day they'll find me. My name is Marcus Vale, and this happened when I was 25, working a summer job in an abandoned steel factory on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The factory had been closed for decades, its skeletal frame looming over the river like a forgotten giant. Locals whispered that workers had disappeared during its last years, some never leaving the building, their fates unknown. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I was drawn to the job for the pay and the thrill of exploring a place that everyone else avoided. On my first night, the air inside the factory was thick with rust and dust, the floors groaning beneath my boots. I was mapping the area with my flashlight when I noticed the faint sound of machinery, hissing and clanging, but nothing was running. I chalked it up to the wind or the building settling. Then I heard a whisper, almost too quiet to notice. "Marcus." It wasn't the wind. Someone or something knew my name. I froze, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The whisper came again, closer this time, echoing through the cavernous space. "Marcus." I swung the beam toward the sound, but all I saw were shadows stretching across rusted beams and broken staircases. Trying to shake it off, I continued my inspection, but every step I took was mirrored by a soft, metallic scrape behind me. I stopped. The sound stopped. I turned sharply. Nothing. My heart pounded, each beat loud in the empty factory. I realized then that the building itself felt alive, listening to me, reacting to me. The shadows seemed to move independently, brushing across walls, dancing just beyond the edge of my light. The whispers weren't random. They were guiding me, teasing me, hinting at corners of the factory I had no business exploring. I should have left. But something inside me, a mixture of fear and curiosity, made me press on, deeper into the bowels of the factory. I reached the main assembly hall, a massive space with rusted cranes hanging like skeletal arms from the ceiling. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness. That's when I noticed it. A figure standing at the far end of the hall. It was tall, unnaturally thin, and completely still. I squinted, trying to make it out, but the shadows swallowed its face. I called out, my voice echoing loudly, but there was no reply. Only a soft, metallic hiss, like someone dragging chains across the concrete. The figure shifted slightly, just enough for me to see it wasn't entirely human. Its limbs bent at impossible angles, and it moved with a fluidity no human could mimic. Panic clawed at me, but I couldn't look away. Every instinct screamed to leave, yet curiosity kept me rooted. I took a cautious step forward. The figure mimicked me instantly, mirroring every motion, every hesitation. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just following me, it was copying me. I backed away slowly, but the figure mirrored me perfectly, closing the distance despite no visible movement. The whispers returned, fragmented and metallic this time, almost like echoes of the factory itself. Closer. Closer. Stay. My flashlight flickered, casting long, warped shadows across the walls. I realized the sound of my own breathing was being echoed, distorted, as if the building was alive, mocking me. The floor beneath my feet groaned louder, almost like it was protesting my presence. Then I saw more figures emerging from the darkness, thin, elongated shadows, crawling along the walls, sliding across the floor, their limbs bending in impossible ways. They didn't speak, didn't move with urgency. They just observed, perfectly synchronized with my movements. I knew I had stumbled into something ancient, something that had absorbed the factory's energy, the lost lives, and now had claimed this building as its hunting ground. Escape suddenly felt impossible. I realized running wouldn't work. Every step I took, the shadows mirrored me perfectly, anticipating my movements, keeping pace without sound. My flashlight flickered again, and for a split second, the figures seemed to multiply, filling the hall like a swarm. Panic threatened to consume me, but I forced myself to think. I remembered an old worker's tale my supervisor had told me. Don't let the factory see fear. If it senses it, it feeds on it. I clenched my fists and focused, walking slowly, deliberately, not allowing the shadows to predict me. The whispers escalated into a metallic chorus, echoing from every corner, every beam, every staircase. They hissed my name, repeated my thoughts, even mimicked my internal fears aloud. My chest burned, as if I were carrying the weight of the factory itself. Then I saw a staircase leading to the mezzanine, a higher ground. I ran for it, hoping elevation would give me control. The shadows surged, reaching, stretching, their elongated limbs scraping metal, trying to pull me back. I scrambled up the stairs, my hands slipping on rusted metal. The shadows followed, climbing impossibly, stretching their limbs along beams, sliding over railings, keeping pace as if gravity didn't exist for them. The whispers turned into guttural, distorted laughter, echoing like clanging machinery gone wrong. At the mezzanine, I paused, trying to catch my breath. The factory below seemed alive, vibrating with unseen energy, the shadows swarming like liquid darkness. I realized something horrifying. The building itself had consumed the people who disappeared. It was no accident. It fed on their fear, on their lives. And now it wanted mine. I shone my flashlight across the mezzanine, and my stomach dropped. One figure stood at the far end, motionless, yet I felt its gaze drill into me. Its head tilted unnaturally, limbs folded in impossible angles. And then I saw more, lining the railings, creeping along beams above, forming a perfect cage of darkness around me. I understood fully. There was no escape, not yet. I realized I had no choice but to confront them. Huddled on the mezzanine, I forced myself to focus, to act deliberately rather than react. Every shadow shifted in perfect sync, anticipating fear. The whispers became a deafening roar, echoing through the steel beams and across the empty machinery. You belong. You belong. I took a step forward. One of the figures mirrored me instantly. Then all the others moved in unison, forming a circle around me. My chest tightened. Their elongated limbs scraped metal and stone, producing a shrill symphony that made my ears ring. I could see glimpses of faces in the shadows, twisted, pale, empty eyes staring, but no expressions. The factory itself seemed to pulse, as if alive, breathing around us. I realized this place wasn't just haunted, it was sentient, a predator that had trapped the souls of all who had vanished before me. And now it was learning me, studying me, preparing to add me to its collection, I realized the shadows were more than mere figures. They were extensions of the factory itself, crawling along beams, stretching across railings, and merging with the darkness below. Every instinct screamed to run, but the figures anticipated every movement, cutting off any escape. Then I remembered the old tales about light. Workers claimed that even a single flame or bright light could disrupt the shadows. My flashlight flickered weakly, so I turned it to full power, directing the beam at the nearest figure. The shadow recoiled instantly, vanishing into the walls. Others hissed and pulled back, forming jagged silhouettes along the edges of the mezzanine. For the first time, I felt a small victory. I realized that light was the only defense. The factory wanted me to fear it, but if I refused, if I forced the shadows back, I might survive. I took a deep breath, shining the light across the space, and began moving cautiously toward the exit stairwell, hoping the rest of the factory would be as responsive. I crept down the stairwell, flashlight held tight, every step a battle against the fear clawing at me. The shadows lingered on the walls and beams, watching, waiting for a moment of weakness. The whispers had become faint again, almost pleading, as if the factory itself was begging me to stay, to give in to the darkness. I reached the ground floor and saw a faint exit light at the far end of the factory. Relief surged, but I forced myself to move cautiously. Every shadow I passed seemed to stretch, elongate, and twist toward me. But when the beam of my flashlight touched them, they recoiled, melting back into the darkness. Finally, I reached the exit door. With trembling hands, I pushed it open. The night air rushed in, cold and real, carrying the scent of rust and decay. I didn't stop running until the factory was far behind me. And even then, I could feel its presence, as if it had marked me, remembered me, and would not forget. I never returned to the factory. Days later, I tried to convince myself it was over, that the shadows, the whispers, the stretching figures belonged to fear and imagination. But I was wrong. A week after leaving, I found rust flakes on my clothes that hadn't been there before. Tiny scratches appeared on my skin, arranged in patterns I didn't recognize. And sometimes, at night, I hear faint metallic whispers calling my name, echoing in the corners of my apartment. The factory isn't gone. It waits, patient, sentient. Every abandoned building in Pittsburgh that had swallowed people before me feeds the same darkness. And now it knows my name, my fears, my movements. One day, it will come again. And next time, it may not let me leave. I live with the memory every day, knowing that some places are alive in ways we cannot comprehend, and that curiosity can be deadly. My name is Elena Hart, and this happened during a hiking trip in the Pocono Mountains, Pennsylvania, when I was 21. I had gone with two friends to explore a trail that was rarely visited, one that promised secluded waterfalls and untouched wilderness. The forest was dense and quiet, the kind of place where even the wind seemed hesitant to move. As we trekked deeper, I noticed the trail narrowing, trees closing in, branches clawing at our clothes. My friends laughed nervously, but I felt uneasy, like something was watching us. Birds were silent, and even the distant sound of the river felt muted. That's when I saw it, a figure standing perfectly still between the trees. At first, I thought it was another hiker, but it didn't move, didn't blink, and didn't respond when we called out. Its face was hidden in shadow, and a cold sense of dread washed over me. The trail ahead felt wrong, as if it had changed overnight, twisting into somewhere I didn't recognize. We hesitated, unsure whether to approach the figure. Suddenly, it vanished. One moment it was there, the next, nothing but empty trees and undergrowth. My friends laughed nervously, saying it must have been a trick of the light. But I felt something shift in the air, a heaviness, as though the forest itself had noticed us. The trail became harder to follow. Landmarks we had passed earlier now seemed unfamiliar. Rocks and roots that I knew should have been to the left were suddenly to the right. Every step felt like the forest was rearranging itself around us. Then we heard whispers, soft and almost melodic, weaving through the trees. "Elena, Elena." They called my name, drawing me toward the denser woods. I froze, realizing the voice came from nowhere and everywhere at once. My friends didn't seem to hear it, but I felt compelled to move, as if some invisible force was pulling me deeper into the forest. I tried to pull myself back from the compulsion, telling myself it was just my imagination. But the forest seemed to resist my will. Every tree I passed, every shadow I glimpsed, felt alive, twisting subtly when I looked away, guiding me further into the unknown. My friends were arguing behind me, voices echoing through the trees, but I couldn't hear them clearly. It was as if the forest had isolated me. Then I saw it again, the shadowed figure. This time, closer, standing partially behind a tree, limbs unnaturally long, tilting in ways no human body could. It didn't move, but my skin crawled. The whispers became urgent, almost pleading. "Come closer. Stay." I stumbled, almost falling into a hidden depression in the trail. Panic set in as I realized that the path we had been following was gone, erased, leaving us stranded. The forest wasn't just confusing. It was bending reality to trap us. To separate me from my friends finally noticed my absence and started calling my name, their voices distant and panicked. I ran toward them, but every step brought me deeper into unfamiliar terrain. The trees seemed to rearrange themselves, creating walls, tunnels, and dead ends that hadn't existed before. I looked back once and saw the figure again, gliding silently through the trees, unnaturally fast, keeping perfect pace with me despite the twisting trail. My heart raced, and the whispers intensified, overlapping with my own thoughts, almost reading my fear. Then the air grew colder, heavy with the scent of wet earth and decay. The shadows beneath the trees stretched unnaturally, creeping toward me like living fingers. I realized with a shiver that this wasn't just a trail. It was a hunting ground. It didn't want to scare me. It wanted to trap me, to make me disappear like so many who had come before. I stumbled over a root and fell hard, scraping my hands and knees, the forest around me silent for a moment, as if waiting. When I looked up, the figure was closer, standing at the edge of a small clearing, almost blending with the twisted tree trunks. Its presence was suffocating, as if the shadows themselves were pressing down on me. I tried to scream for my friends, but my voice caught in my throat. The whispers returned, urgent and fragmented, repeating my name, describing my fear before I even felt it. "Elena, stay, forever." My chest tightened, and every instinct screamed to flee. But the trail ahead seemed to vanish into darkness. I scrambled to my feet and forced myself forward, ignoring the pain. The forest twisted with every step, the path folding in ways that made no sense. Trees seemed to grow taller and closer, branches reaching like hands, and the shadows moved independently, anticipating each motion, herding me toward a part of the forest I had never seen on the map. I reached a small stream and paused, hoping the sound of running water might ground me in reality. But the shadows didn't hesitate. They swarmed the banks, stretching across the water, moving without touching it, perfectly synchronized, like predators testing their prey. The whispers grew louder, echoing in my ears, forming sentences I couldn't escape. Closer. You belong. Do not fight. The trail had completely disappeared. Rocks, roots, and fallen branches now formed walls and barriers I didn't remember. Every instinct screamed that I was trapped, that the forest had changed into a labyrinth designed to separate me from safety. My friends' distant shouts were swallowed by the twisted canopy above. Panic surged, but I forced myself to focus. I had to move. I crawled along the edge of the stream, flashlight trembling in my hands, every shadow reacting instantly, moving to block, to corral me. I realized the forest wasn't just alive, it was intelligent, a predator feeding on fear, and I was already deep inside its web. I forced myself to stand and move faster, stumbling through undergrowth that seemed to shift beneath my feet. The shadows reacted immediately, flowing like liquid, blocking paths and forming walls out of darkness. The whispers were now a chorus, overlapping my own thoughts, telling me things no one should know, secrets buried deep in my mind. Ahead, I glimpsed a faint light flickering between trees. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it promised safety, or at least the illusion of it. My heart pounded as I sprinted toward it, branches tearing at my clothes, roots tripping me, the shadows snapping just behind, eager, relentless. Then the figure appeared again, towering and impossible, stretching above the treetops. It didn't move toward me. It simply watched, forcing the forest itself to close in, shaping the trail, turning every tree into a wall, every shadow into a cage. I realized with terror that I wasn't running. I was being funneled, guided into the forest's heart. I reached a small clearing, gasping, soaked with sweat and trembling from fear. The faint light ahead revealed a ring of ancient, gnarled trees that formed a natural circle. The shadows gathered at the edges, elongated, twisting, almost crawling along the roots and trunks. The whispers converged into one voice, commanding and cold. Stay. Forever. It's your turn. My friends appeared at the edge of the clearing, calling my name, but they seemed muted, distant, almost like phantoms. Panic surged. I realized the forest had separated us intentionally, feeding on my fear and confusion. The figure stepped closer, and for the first time, I saw its face, or at least a twisted approximation of one. Featureless, yet somehow knowing, aware, alive. I understood then. I was trapped. The forest controlling every step, shaping reality to keep me inside its grasp. Every instinct screamed to run, but every path forward seemed to vanish under the growing darkness. My heart raced. I had to act or be claimed completely. I forced myself to focus, forcing panic aside. The shadows advanced slightly, but I kept my eyes on the faint light flickering beyond the circle of trees. Each step I took, the forest tried to trick me, moving roots to trip me, shifting shadows to block my path. But I refused to let it dictate my actions. I reached the edge of the clearing and spotted a narrow trail that seemed untouched, bathed in the faint glow of the moon. The shadows hesitated at the perimeter, recoiling slightly, their elongated limbs stretching but not advancing. The whispers turned frantic, overlapping and shouting my name, as if the forest itself couldn't believe I might escape. I ran. Branches tore at my clothes, roots grabbed my feet, but I pressed on, ignoring every obstacle. The figure appeared at the far end of the trail one last time, motionless, watching, its faceless presence radiating hunger and disappointment. I realized then the forest was alive, intelligent, patient, and it would remember me forever. Finally, I emerged from the trees into a larger clearing, the moonlight revealing a familiar trail marker. My friends ran to me, relief and fear etched across their faces. I could barely speak, my body trembling, every nerve screaming that the danger hadn't left. It had simply paused. We left the forest immediately, the whispers fading but never entirely gone. Even now, months later, I can feel their presence lingering in my mind. The memory of faceless figures and a living, breathing forest that adapts and hunts. The Pocono Mountains Trail wasn't haunted in the usual sense. It was alive, aware, patient, and insidious, waiting for the next curious soul to wander too deep. I never returned there. I warn anyone who dares ask, but no one truly understands until they experience it. And I know, somewhere in those woods, the shadows still whisper my name, waiting for the day I, or someone else, dare to step too far. My name is Liam Carter, and this happened when I was working the night shift as a security guard at an abandoned hospital in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The building had been shut down for years after a series of mysterious deaths. But the city still owned it, and my job was simple: patrol the hallways, check the doors, and report anything unusual. From the moment I stepped inside, the air felt wrong, heavy, cold, and almost metallic. The fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, casting long, jagged shadows down the deserted corridors. At first, I thought it was just the building settling, or my imagination. But then I heard it, a soft, wet whisper echoing through the halls, calling my name. I froze, listening. The sound wasn't random. It was deliberate. Something, or someone, was moving in the shadows, watching, waiting. The whispers came again, closer this time, dripping with malice. "Liam, come here." My pulse quickened, and I realized this night shift might be unlike any other I'd ever worked. I walked slowly down the hallway, flashlight in hand, trying to stay calm. Every step echoed loudly, but the whispering persisted, soft and wet, coming from the end of the corridor. The sound of dragging feet joined it, slow, deliberate, but I couldn't see anyone. Turning a corner, I glimpsed a shadow move across the wall, too tall, too fluid to be human. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my body froze. The shadow seemed to pulse with life, stretching and contracting unnaturally, always just out of reach of my light. Then I saw the first room, its door ajar, faint flickers of light inside. I swore I could hear sobbing, low and mournful, mixed with the whispers repeating my name. The air grew colder, and my breath fogged in front of me. I realized the hospital itself felt alive, aware of my presence, and that I had entered a place where the line between reality and nightmare was already gone. I stumbled backward, nearly falling over a fallen chair, and the shadow rose slowly. Its elongated limbs stretched unnaturally, scraping the floor, the sound like metal against metal. The whispers became chaotic, overlapping my own thoughts, echoing through the room with a voice that wasn't human. "You belong here, with us." I forced my shaking hands to grip the flashlight tighter. Its beam revealed glimpses of movement across the room, shadows crawling along the walls, merging into one massive form that seemed to grow with every heartbeat. The air felt heavier, thickening around my chest, making it hard to breathe. Panic finally overcame me. I ran for the door, but the corridor outside seemed different now. Longer, darker, twisting in ways it hadn't before. The hospital wasn't just abandoned, it was alive, feeding on fear, warping reality to trap anyone who entered. I realized that escaping it wouldn't be as simple as running. I stepped cautiously into the room, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The air was icy, and the smell of something metallic and decayed filled my nose. The walls were stained with years of neglect, peeling paint hanging like strips of skin, and the floorboards groaned beneath my weight. The sobbing had stopped, replaced by a soft scraping sound, like fingernails dragging across metal. Then I saw it. A figure hunched over one of the old hospital beds, its form blurred, shifting, almost liquid. I could feel its gaze piercing me, even though I couldn't see a face. The whispers returned, louder, echoing off the walls, repeating, "Liam, stay." My pulse raced, but my feet were rooted. Every instinct screamed to flee, but something compelled me to watch, to see what it wanted. Suddenly, the figure's head snapped up, impossibly fast, and I saw empty, black sockets where eyes should be. The room seemed to constrict around me, the walls bending subtly, trapping me in this nightmare. I sprinted down the corridor, my flashlight casting frantic, wavering beams across broken tiles and rusted medical carts. The whispers followed me, louder now, overlapping with every thought in my head, twisting my sense of reality. "You cannot leave. You cannot leave." The hallway seemed endless, stretching and bending as if the building itself had grown. Doors that I had passed earlier appeared in different places, and shadows clung to every corner, moving unnaturally, reaching with elongated fingers. I felt them brushing against my arms, leaving cold, wet streaks on my skin. At a junction, I glimpsed my reflection in a shattered window. My eyes looked hollow, and the shadows behind me had multiplied, standing upright, motionless, like dark sentinels. My stomach churned as I realized the hospital wasn't just haunted, it was hunting, learning, and adapting. Every instinct screamed to escape, but the building resisted. I pressed onward, moving toward a faint glimmer of light at the end of the corridor, praying it was real, praying it was the exit. I reached a stairwell, hoping it would lead me outside. But the shadows moved instantly to block the entrance, their forms twisting and bending unnaturally. The whispers had become screams, echoing from every corner, every vent, every broken window. "Stay. Forever." I slammed my shoulder against the nearest shadow, expecting resistance, but my hand passed through as if it were smoke. Panic surged, but I forced myself to think. If the shadows were extensions of the hospital itself, maybe I could use the building's layout against them. I darted down a side corridor I had noticed earlier, hoping the shadows would be too focused to follow closely. The air grew colder, my breath visible in front of me, and the walls seemed to pulse, expanding and contracting as if the building was breathing. The screams faded momentarily, replaced by a low hum vibrating through the floor, echoing in my chest. Every instinct screamed that the hospital wanted me cornered, and soon. I stumbled into what looked like the old surgical wing, cold and sterile, even though years of decay had left the room almost unrecognizable. Rusted equipment and overturned tables littered the floor, and the smell of iron and rot was overwhelming. Shadows clung to the walls and ceiling, creeping along the beams like living smoke. I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. But it wasn't just mine. I could feel something else pulsing in the room, a presence that was alive, aware, and hungry. The whispers returned, sharper and faster now, repeating my name in a chorus of overlapping voices. "Liam, stay, belong." Suddenly, the largest shadow detached from the ceiling, descending with fluid, unnatural movements. Its elongated limbs scraped the walls, producing a metallic screech that made my skin crawl. I realized with horror that the hospital wasn't just a building. It was an entity, feeding on fear, shaping itself around intruders, and I had walked directly into its core. I backed away slowly, my flashlight trembling, trying to find an escape route. But the shadows anticipated every move, stretching and twisting to block the hallways. The whispers became frantic, echoing through every vent and crevice. Do not leave. Belong. Then I saw a door at the far end of the room, slightly open with faint light spilling through. It was my only chance. I sprinted, dodging the elongated shadows that snapped at my heels and clung to the walls. The metallic screeches and distorted whispers followed me relentlessly, making my head pound. As I reached the door, one shadow lunged directly at me, but for a split second, it paused, as if calculating before recoiling into the walls. I flung the door open and stumbled into a stairwell leading upward. The hospital seemed to moan around me, walls twisting subtly, but the light above promised freedom, and I ran with every ounce of strength I had left, praying that I could escape before it trapped me completely. I stumbled up the stairwell, every step echoing through the building like a warning. The shadows had not followed, but I could feel them behind the walls, watching, waiting, pulsating with some malevolent intelligence. The whispers had faded to soft murmurs, yet I knew they were still there, just beyond perception, urging me to stop, to give in. At the top, a faint emergency exit sign flickered, casting weak green light over the corridor. My lungs burned, legs trembling, but I ran toward it, ignoring every instinct that told me the hospital might change again, warp the exit, and trap me forever. I dared a glance behind and saw the figure at the stairwell landing, motionless, towering, watching me leave, as if marking my escape for the next time. I reached the door, threw it open, and cold night air hit me like a wall. I collapsed onto the pavement outside, shaking, drenched in sweat, and realized I had survived, but only barely. I never returned to that hospital. Days later, I could still hear faint whispers in my dreams. The memory of those elongated shadows etched into my mind. Every time I walk past abandoned buildings, I feel the same cold, suffocating presence. And I know that somewhere, the Harrisburg Hospital waits patiently for its next victim. The building was more than haunted. It was alive, aware, and patient, feeding on fear and shaping itself to trap anyone foolish enough to enter. I consider myself lucky to have escaped, but the fear follows me, a constant reminder that curiosity can be deadly. Now, whenever I see the old hospital from across the street, its broken windows staring like empty eyes, I shiver. The shadows still linger inside, waiting, whispering, and remembering me. And I know that if I ever return, it will not let me leave a second time. My name is Rachel Simmons, and this happened when I moved into an old farmhouse in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The house had been empty for decades, abandoned after the previous owner mysteriously disappeared. I was drawn to it because of its charm and isolation. But there was something about the cellar that made my skin crawl the first time I stepped inside. It was dark and damp, with stone walls blackened by age and moisture. The air smelled of mildew and rot, thick and suffocating. I hadn't planned to explore it much, but curiosity got the better of me one evening. I lit a single candle, the flickering flame barely illuminating the jagged stone steps leading deeper. As I descended, I noticed scratch marks along the walls, deep, uneven, and fresh. My heart raced. The scratches weren't old. They looked like something had been trying to escape, or perhaps trying to warn me. A cold draft whispered through the cellar, carrying faint, unintelligible murmurs that made my teeth chatter. I inched further down the steps, every creak echoing ominously through the stone chamber. The murmurs grew louder, almost coherent, like a chorus of voices whispering from every corner. My candle flickered violently, and I thought I saw shapes moving just beyond the light. Then I saw it. A small doorway at the back of the cellar, partially hidden behind crates and debris. From within came a faint, reddish glow, pulsating slowly. I couldn't tell if it was a reflection or something else, but I felt drawn to it, despite the fear gnawing at my mind. As I approached, the air grew colder, thickening around me like water. The murmurs turned into distinct whispers. "Rachel, don't come closer. Stay away." My hands shook. My pulse hammered in my ears, but something urged me forward. I stepped toward the doorway, and for the first time, I felt the cellar was aware of me. Waiting, watching, alive. I hesitated at the doorway, my candlelight flickering against the stone walls. Beyond it was darkness, so thick it seemed to swallow the glow entirely. I could hear scratching and shifting noises from within, as if something moved just out of sight. The whispers grew insistent, repeating my name over and over. "Rachel, come, stay." I forced myself forward, stepping into the hidden room. The floor was uneven, covered in dust and grime, and the air was colder than anything I had ever felt. Shapes danced just beyond the reach of my light, twisting and recoiling as I approached. I could swear I saw shadows peeling off the walls, forming figures that mimicked my movements. Then I noticed markings etched into the stone, symbols I didn't recognize, glowing faintly in the red light. My stomach churned, a deep, primal fear clawing at me. The cellar wasn't just a room. It was a trap, alive, feeding on curiosity and fear. And I had just stepped into its heart. The scratching intensified, now echoing from multiple corners simultaneously. I backed toward the doorway, but the room seemed larger than before, stretching impossibly, walls bending slightly inward and upward, distorting reality. The shadows advanced toward me in fluid, unnatural movements, and the symbols on the walls pulsed with a soft red light, as if feeding off my fear. A low moan rose from the depths of the cellar, vibrating through the floor and into my bones. My candle flickered violently, threatening to go out, and I could feel the air pressing in on me. The whispers had grown frantic. "Rachel, join us. Forever." Panic surged, but I forced myself to take a deep breath. The door was still behind me, but now I wasn't sure it led anywhere. Every instinct screamed to run, yet every step forward felt like surrendering to the cellar's will. The room wasn't haunted. It was alive, aware, and patient, watching my every move, waiting for me to make a fatal mistake. I forced myself to move deeper into the hidden room, my candle trembling in my hand. The shadows seemed to react instantly to my presence, stretching and writhing along the walls like living smoke. Every step I took echoed too loudly, bouncing off walls that didn't feel solid, distorting reality around me. The symbols on the floor glowed brighter as I approached, forming patterns that made my head spin. I could feel an unseen weight pressing down, a presence that wanted to crush me with its attention. The whispers overlapped, frantic and pleading, warning me to turn back, yet urging me to stay. A sick contradiction that rattled my mind. "You cannot leave. Stay forever." I stumbled over a loose stone and nearly fell. But the shadows recoiled just enough for me to catch my balance. My heart pounded as I realized the cellar wasn't just alive. It was intelligent, anticipating my movements, feeding off my fear, shaping the space to keep me trapped. I had to find a way out before it claimed me entirely. I reached a corner of the room where the glow was brightest, and the shadows seemed to converge, forming a dense, writhing mass. My candle flickered, and for a moment, The entire room was swallowed in darkness. The whispers surged, louder than ever, overlapping my thoughts, almost speaking directly into my mind. Rachel, stay. Belong. Desperate, I backed toward the doorway, but it had vanished. The cellar had shifted again, walls twisting subtly, floors sloping in impossible directions. Panic clawed at me, but I forced my legs to move, ducking under low-hanging shadows that lashed like tendrils. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but there was nowhere to go. No exit, only the cellar, alive and watching, shaping itself around my terror. I realized with horror that this place had claimed others before me. The air was thick with their lingering fear, a dark residue that pressed against my skin. My candle flickered one last time before steadying, and I knew I had to act, or the cellar would consume me completely. I forced myself to take a deep breath, trying to calm the rising panic. The shadows had formed a dense wall around me, writhing like smoke in a storm. The red symbols on the floor pulsed rhythmically, as though the cellar itself had a heartbeat, synchronized with my own fear. Every whisper seemed sharper now, insistent and commanding. You cannot leave. Belong to us. I noticed a faint outline of another doorway on the far wall, just visible through the writhing shadows. My heart leapt, and I ran toward it, swiping away shadows that lashed out like living tendrils. The floor beneath me shifted subtly, as if trying to trap me in place, but I pressed forward, driven by pure survival instinct. Then I saw a figure emerge from the darkest corner of the room. A humanoid shape, faceless, its elongated arms stretching impossibly. It didn't move aggressively, but I felt its awareness, its hunger, its patience. The cellar had finally revealed its heart, and I knew escaping would demand everything I had. I lunged toward the faint doorway, my candlelight flickering wildly, illuminating the writhing shadows that reached for me. The humanoid figure followed, moving with an unnatural fluidity, stretching and recoiling as it tracked my every step. The whispers now merged into a deafening chorus, pressing into my mind. You belong. Stay forever. The floor beneath me seemed to shift, forcing me to sprint faster, dodging protruding stones and shadowy tendrils. I could hear something slithering along the walls, a wet, dragging sound that made my skin crawl. My candle sputtered, but held just long enough to reveal a final obstacle. A pit in the floor that hadn't been there before, filled with writhing, black mist. I jumped over it, landing hard, scraping my hands and knees, but I kept moving. The doorway was so close now, the light beyond it almost blinding in comparison to the cellar's darkness. My pulse pounded in my ears, every nerve screaming that the final confrontation was at hand. I hurled myself through the doorway, the light beyond burning my eyes after the suffocating darkness of the cellar. Behind me, the shadows recoiled for a moment, hissing and writhing like liquid. But the faceless figure lingered just inside, unmoving yet aware. The whispers were still there, faint now, pressing against my mind, promising that this wasn't over. We will wait. We will remember. I stumbled into the fresh night air, gasping, my lungs burning. The moonlight felt unreal, almost alien after the oppressive darkness below. I turned back toward the farmhouse, and the doorway to the cellar seemed normal again, silent, almost innocent, as though it had never been a trap. But I knew better. The cellar had claimed part of my soul, and the red symbols and shadowed humanoid forms were imprinted in my memory forever. I collapsed onto the grass, shaking, candle long extinguished, realizing that the farmhouse and its cellar were alive, patient, and hungry. And I had narrowly survived its attention. The next morning, I didn't go back inside. I packed my things and left Lancaster entirely. But even miles away, I could feel the cellar's presence lingering in my mind. Dreams of twisting shadows, glowing red symbols, and that faceless figure haunted my sleep. Every creak, every flicker of darkness reminded me that it was patient, waiting for the next curious soul to step inside. I told myself I would never return, but I also knew that the cellar's influence didn't end with my departure. Its hunger followed, subtle and insidious, a constant pressure in the back of my thoughts. The farmhouse remains empty now, but somewhere beneath its floorboards, the shadows still wriggle, and the symbols pulse, alive, remembering. The forgotten cellar of Lancaster isn't just a legend, it is intelligent, patient, and alive. And anyone who enters will discover, as I did, that curiosity can be deadly. My name is Ethan Brooks, and this happened when I went hiking with friends in the Pocono Mountains, Pennsylvania, during late autumn. We were drawn to the remoteness of the trails, the crisp air, and the golden leaves carpeting the forest floor. But by sunset, the beauty gave way to unease, and I realized something in the mountains was not right. We had been hiking all day and decided to set up camp near an old, abandoned ranger cabin. The woods were unusually silent, no wind, no rustling of wildlife. Just the faint crunch of our boots on the leaves and our own chatter. I felt eyes on us, though every time I turned, the trees appeared empty. As night fell, a low fog rolled in, blanketing the forest in gray-white mist. I first heard the whispers then, soft, distant, almost carried on the wind. Go. Stay. Don't leave. My friends laughed nervously, but I knew I had heard something. Something was watching us, patient and deliberate. By midnight, the forest felt alive in a way that was wrong. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves made me jump. I volunteered to check the perimeter with my flashlight, but the beam barely penetrated the dense fog. Shapes moved just at the edge of the light, too fast, too fluid to be wildlife. Suddenly, my friend Jake shouted. I spun around, flashlight swinging, but the fog swallowed him instantly. A faint echo of his voice called out, "Ethan, help!" I ran toward it, but when I reached the spot, the trees were empty. Only his boot print remained in the wet earth, leading to nowhere. Panic set in, and I realized we weren't just lost. We were being hunted. The whispers returned, now clearer, overlapping the fog. "You cannot leave. Stay with us." My friends huddled together, eyes wide with terror. Whatever was in the forest was intelligent, patient, and it had begun its game. I grabbed a flashlight and tried to lead the group out of the fog, but every direction looked the same. Trees twisted unnaturally, forming corridors that didn't seem real. The forest had changed while we weren't looking. Or perhaps it had always been like this, waiting for us to wander too far. The whispers followed us, echoing in impossible directions. My friends' fear was palpable, their breathing ragged, eyes darting at every shadow. Something brushed past my shoulder, too quick, too solid to be the wind. I spun around, but there was nothing, only fog curling along the forest floor. Then we saw a figure at the edge of the mist, a tall silhouette standing perfectly still. Its presence made the air vibrate, and the whispers became coherent. "Stay. Join us." A deep dread rooted me to the spot. My friends shouted to move, but one by one, they froze too, as though the figure's gaze had already claimed us. The figure vanished the instant we blinked, but the forest remained alive with its presence. Whispers swirled from every direction, overlapping and pressing into our minds. "You belong. Stay." I felt my body trembling uncontrollably, heart hammering. Each step forward felt like moving through invisible hands, unseen and cold, trying to drag us back. Jake's voice cracked as he whispered that he couldn't find the path. Every familiar landmark had shifted. The cabin we had set up near was gone, replaced by gnarled trees that seemed to lean closer, watching. My flashlight caught glimpses of shadows moving just beyond the edge of the beam, always disappearing when I looked directly at them. I realized the forest wasn't random. It was hunting. It twisted reality, preying on our fear, isolating us one by one. The whispers grew urgent, overlapping our panicked shouts. There was no natural way out. We were trapped, and something in the fog was learning how to claim us. We stumbled forward blindly, the fog thickening with each step. The trees seemed to shift, forming walls that trapped us, bending the trails into a maze we had never seen before. Every crack of a branch, every distant rustle made us jump. The forest wasn't natural. It was aware, patient, and cruel. Jake whispered that he thought he saw movement to our left. I swung my flashlight, and for a fleeting second, a figure appeared, tall, thin, impossibly still, watching. When I blinked, it was gone, replaced by nothing but fog. My friends clung together, their faces pale with terror. I realized we weren't being stalked randomly. The forest was shaping itself around our fear, predicting our movements, learning our weaknesses. The whispers became clearer, now almost commands. Don't leave. Join us. I could feel the forest breathing, alive with intent. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs felt heavy, weighted by dread. I knew one misstep could be fatal, yet there was no choice but forward. We came upon a clearing, and for a brief moment, hope flickered. Moonlight illuminated the ground, and the fog thinned slightly. But that hope died instantly. From the far edge of the clearing, a figure emerged. Tall, faceless, limbs elongated unnaturally, moving with impossible fluidity. Behind it, dozens of smaller silhouettes rose from the fog, surrounding us silently, perfectly still. My friends screamed, but their voices were swallowed by the thick air. The whispers became deafening, speaking inside my mind. You cannot leave. You belong. The shadows advanced without sound, moving as one, their black forms stretching and twisting unnaturally across the forest floor. I could feel their attention locking on each of us, pressing into my chest like an invisible weight. Panic surged through me. We had no weapons, no escape routes. The forest had become a living trap, intelligent and merciless. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the shadows anticipated us, ready to claim whoever faltered first. We backed toward the edge of the clearing, but the shadows anticipated every move. The tall, faceless figure led the swarm, its elongated limbs scraping silently against the trees. The smaller silhouettes moved in perfect unison, a chilling, predatory rhythm that made my stomach turn. Every instinct screamed that we were no longer in control. The forest and its horrors had claimed it. Jake tripped and fell, and a dozen black tendrils of fog-like shadow reached for him. He screamed, and I lunged, pulling him to his feet. But the shadows didn't stop. They recoiled momentarily, then reformed, closing in with deliberate precision. My mind raced, trying to calculate any route of escape, but every path twisted back into the fog. Every tree seemed to lean closer, watching, learning. The whispers intensified, overlapping in a cacophony. You belong. You cannot leave. Stay forever. My friends clung together, trembling, eyes wide with panic. I realized we had entered a game designed to trap us, and the forest was an intelligent predator, patient and unrelenting. We ran blindly into the trees, trying to escape the clearing. But the forest warped around us. Every step led us back to the same spot, the clearing repeating itself as if the land itself was folding in on us. The shadows glided silently over the leaves, advancing with a patience that made my chest tighten. A low, guttural hiss echoed through the fog, and I caught a glimpse of one figure leaning impossibly from a tree, its elongated arms stretching toward us. The whispers became commands, clawing into my thoughts. "Stop. Join us. Forever." My friends screamed, their voices swallowed instantly by the fog, leaving only the oppressive presence of the shadows. Panic surged uncontrollably. We had no way to fight, no way to hide. The forest had become a living labyrinth, feeding on our fear and hunting us systematically. Every instinct screamed that one of us would fall first, and I realized the shadows were not just watching. They were choosing who would vanish next. We stumbled into a narrow gorge, hoping the terrain would slow the shadows. The fog clung to every tree and boulder, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. My flashlight flickered violently, casting our distorted shadows across the rocks. Every sound, our footsteps, our panicked breathing, was magnified, echoing off the stone walls like a warning. Jake's hand slipped from mine, and I barely caught him before he fell into the dark chasm. Behind us, the humanoid figures moved fluidly, gliding over rocks and roots as if they weren't bound by gravity. The whispers surged into my mind. "You cannot leave. Stay forever. Join us." My heart pounded as I realized there was no natural escape. The forest itself had become a predator, reshaping the land and swallowing our paths. Every instinct screamed to run, but the shadows anticipated our every move, pressing relentlessly from all sides, and I feared the next misstep would be the last for one of us. Finally, as dawn crept over the mountains, a narrow beam of sunlight pierced the fog. The shadows recoiled slightly, hissing and writhing before retreating into the thick forest. We collapsed on the mossy ground, exhausted, soaked with sweat, and shaking from the fear that had gripped us for hours. I looked around, counting my friends, Jake, Sarah, and me. Everyone was alive, but we knew we had been marked. The forest was patient. It had allowed us to survive, but its hunger lingered in every shadow, in every whisper of wind through the trees. We had seen the edge of something ancient and intelligent, a predator that claimed souls through fear and isolation. We left the Pocono Mountains that morning, never to return. Yet even now, months later, I feel the forest's pull in my dreams, the whispers echoing, the shadows stretching. The mountains are patient, always waiting for the next group, ready to trap anyone foolish enough to wander alone. As the fog of Pennsylvania's darkest corners lifts, we are left with a chilling truth. The ordinary world hides extraordinary terror. From the forgotten cellar of Lancaster to the vanishing trails of the Pocono Mountains, these stories show us that curiosity, isolation, and fear can awaken forces beyond comprehension. Each tale was told by someone who lived it, real people who faced shadows, whispers, and horrors that defy explanation. These are not legends or campfire stories. They are documented encounters, chilling evidence that darkness waits patiently in forgotten towns, abandoned houses, and endless forests. If there's one lesson to remember, it is this: be wary of what lurks beyond the familiar. For the quietest corners often hide the most insidious terrors. And though these stories have ended tonight, the shadows of Pennsylvania continue to watch, to wait, and to remember.